So welcome back to In Divine Time Tarot. My name is Tamira Alicia, or just Myra. This is my first sit down YouTube video. This is actually my second time recording this because the first time, for whatever reason, the audio got messed up. So here we are again. So this video is going to be about my own spiritual awakening and kind of what was happening in my life that brought me to the point of even having a spiritual awakening, and like what life was like once I experienced it, and what exactly happened, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of kind of like mysterious energy around, like when people say like, oh, well, like, what was your spiritual awakening like? And so I want to kind of like dive a little bit deeper into like my experience and what that was like for me. Okay, so my spiritual awakening happened when I want to say 27 years old, but it kind of started like I kind of started the process before I turned 27. 27 was like when the actual event had occurred. So I don't want to make this video super long, but I want to give you guys a good amount of context. So when I was a child, I had like a lot of abandonment issues and issues with self-love and confidence and all of these things, right? So I was a child that had a lot of deep trauma, and I come from a very religious family. So, you know, there was also a lot of trauma there surrounding religion and God and shame and all of those types of things. And ever since I was little, I want to say about 8 years old, I've always had like these dreams. And I would have dreams about people that I knew, about people that I didn't know. And in these dreams, I would either learn stuff about them that like I had no way of knowing because no one would tell this stuff to a child, or I would have dreams about stuff that is currently happening to them or that would happen to them. And you know, as a child, I didn't have discernment, so I would have a dream about somebody and I would just go and tell them. And my mother would tell me, well, you know, like you can't tell people these things like this because, first of all, it scares them when you tell them these things, or they think that I'm telling you my personal, like their personal business. So then I want to say like around that same time, 8, 9 years old, was when I started to see like other beings, right? So angels, other things, spirits, stuff like that. And for me, being a very inquisitive kid and also being in church, that raised a lot of questions, because what they were saying about death and like when you die and what happens, it wasn't matching up to what I was seeing and what I was experiencing in my real life. And so I always struggled with church, and I always struggled with my place in it, because I always questioned everything, and it didn't make any sense to me. And the older I got, the less and less it made sense, and the more people became frustrated with my questions because they couldn't provide answers. And so when I turned 18, I kind of like left church, right? And I started my own path towards God, trying to figure out how would I do that? What would that even look like? And I went through like a lot of hard times, like a lot of trials and a lot of tribulations. And at some point I just thought that God was done with me, or like just turned me off, and didn't want to have anything to do with me. So therefore I decided that I didn't want to have anything to do with God. And I had kind of just went through this wild phase. And through this wild phase, I was definitely like drinking a lot and partying a lot. And that was part of this numbness that I needed to create within myself. One, because of that feeling of loss of connection, but also because I felt the most alone I had ever felt in my entire life. And so I decided to start getting therapy. And I started getting therapy, and a few years down the line, I ended up having my daughter. And for me, that was like kind of the first step into like on my spiritual path of like consciously changing, because I knew that I wouldn't want my child to grow up with the same type of childhood that I had, to experience the things that I had. And because of that, I knew that I had to make a change. But I knew the change had to be more than me just being a different type of parent, or just me just having a different type of parent style. But I didn't know like what that meant or what that looked like. And so I decided that, okay, now it's time for me to reconnect with God, because I need to figure this out. And for a little while, even after I had my daughter, everything was kind of like, okay, like, I was a good mom. Wasn't passing down any of the things that had occurred with me, but there was still something missing. And I couldn't figure out what it was, and I couldn't figure out how to get to it. Like, I just felt this feeling of being lost again. And so I can remember like getting into meditation, and I can also remember feeling like lost again. And so I ended up having another child. I have a son too. So I have a daughter and I have a son. And it's so crazy, because both of my kids taught me these two lessons that I needed to know, that were like the cornerstone of me being on this spiritual journey. So my daughter taught me that just being good for someone else, or changing your ways just for someone else, wasn't enough. You had to change it for yourself. You have to like want more for yourself. You have to be in love with yourself, right? And I was always the type of individual that was always searching for love outside of me, because I didn't understand the concept of how someone could love their self. I wasn't raised with that concept. I was raised in a house where we don't talk about emotions, we don't express feelings, we don't give hugs, kisses, anything. So like the concept of being affectionate or showing love was it's a very strange thing for me, and I had to learn how to do it. And so I was always on the hunt for that outside of myself. I knew how to give it, but I didn't know how to receive it. That was another thing I struggled with. And so my son, he actually taught me how to receive. So I had these two kids, and I still needed this connection. And so when I was 27, I realized that, like, you know what? I've done all the therapy that I could do. And it wasn't enough. There was something else that I needed, like something more deep, more profound, more, I don't know. I just needed something more. And I knew that I was not going to get it with my therapist. And it was not that my therapist didn't do a great job. She did. She taught me a lot of practical tools and skills that I still use to this day. But what I needed, she couldn't give me, or she couldn't show me how to do. This was a journey that I was going to have to take on my own. And I can remember it was one day that I was home alone by myself, and the kids were gone. And I just felt so stressed and overwhelmed. And I don't know, I was a person also, and I think it's, important to mention that I was definitely, not, I was suicidal. And so I don't know if there is a safe word that I'm supposed to use on YouTube for that, but I would that's what I was. And so I remember very clearly, just like it was yesterday, I went into my room and I put a pillow on my floor and I decided to do a meditation. But this meditation, I needed answers. And so I laid down on my floor, put my head on the pillow, and I just closed my eyes. And I literally just laid there until I felt like it was just darkness in my mind, in my thoughts, everywhere. It was just darkness. And I can remember laying there, and then I said, I need you to tell me why I'm here. And if you can't tell me, then I'm going to have to go. And I laid there for like a good 10 minutes. And then just like I'm talking to you and you can, hear me, or it was like the voice was as clear as I'm talking to you. And the voice said to teach. And back then, your girl had zero patience. So I was like, so to teach love. And then I was like, well, how do you teach love? And the voice was like, just be love, just be it. And then I was quiet for a minute because I was still thinking, like, how do you be love? And the voice said again to me, be light. And so it was it was like a full circle moment, because I was this girl who struggled with the concept of loving oneself, right? I had struggled with love my entire life, from a child to an adult. And to find out that my purpose was to simply lead from my heart and to be love and to exude love and to teach love and to be light it was so insane. Because if you think about the paradox of someone who struggled with love and never understood it, never understood the concept of self-love, to now be the person to teach it, it was it was a mind-boggling moment for me. And I can just remember crying, because everything that I had gone through in my entire life had made sense. Like literally everything. And even like the most horrible things. So I didn't think that I was going to talk about this, but I guess like it kind of shows a lot about what happened after kind of like the spiritual awakening. So when I was 19, I was essayed. And I was essayed by my father's friend. And I can remember for like a year or two after that, just basically being like a complete zombie. And just feeling numb. And I remember that a few months after I had had that spiritual awakening, I was in the dentist's office and, just going for a routine cleaning, whatever. And so I'm sitting in the dentist's office, and the man who essayed me walks in. And this man wasn't that much older than me, I think. I could be wrong, though. Maybe he just looked younger for his age back when I was younger. I don't know. But I wasn't expecting him to walk in with a cane. And he just looked like life had been rough for him. And I can remember thinking when I saw him with that cane and like limping in, there was a part of me that like froze a little bit because not out of fear, but just like out of, I was not expecting to see this person, like this person. When I went into the dentist office of all places. But there was also a part of me that felt sorry for him because I thought, wow, look at him. And I wonder, when he was a child or a young man or whatever, I wonder what happened to him to make him think that it was okay to do this to someone else. And in that moment, I realized that the hatred that I thought I had for him actually didn't have. And the things that I thought that I would say to him, I didn't say. And not because I was afraid or not because I was, I don't know, I thought that I would like scream or whatever. It was just this feeling of calmness and peace and like almost pity. And it wasn't because I felt like, oh, he was sorry for his actions, or it wasn't even about him, right? It was in my mind. I realized that leading from a space of love, and after having this experience, this spiritual awakening, that it completely changed my perspective on how I thought about human beings. And it allowed me to disengage my emotions and how I felt from a reactionary standpoint and look at someone as a person and then a person and their actions, right? So I separated the two. And it doesn't mean that the actions were correct or anything like that, right? Or that they're not responsible for them. But I realized at that moment that it allowed me to look at this person as, wow, someone probably did this to him, or someone probably touched him, or someone probably, whatever the case is. And it didn't make me forgive the action, but it brought some sense of understanding of his human experience, right? And I always say that forgiveness is not about the other person. Forgiveness is about us, right? So when someone does something that I deem as wrong or hurtful or whatever, when I tell that person that I forgive them, what that means for me is I don't want to carry this baggage, right? So I release it, and by releasing it, I forgive it, right? I forgive what you did. Does that mean that I'm going to let you in my life so you can do it again? No, it doesn't mean that, right? Because boundaries, they're important. But also, this awakening that I had, it completely changed my perspective on how I thought about human beings, how I approach my own emotions, how I stopped being reactionary and allowed my emotions to sometimes, like take over. And so there was a period, and I'm very curious about this with other people's spiritual awakenings, where I remember like after I had that conversation with God, so to speak, there was a period that I went through where I couldn't understand human beings, other human beings. I felt so connected to everything, like every person, every animal, every, just literally everything, like the air. I felt so connected to everything that it was overstimulation it doesn't even begin to compare. But it just felt like I was connected to everything all at one time. And I became so sad with like the state of the world, and this, like the way that earth, like the way that the pollution and global warming. And I can remember feeling like I didn't understand why human beings, or how human beings could be so mean to one another. And I can remember wanting to leave, but not leave like, you know, by the by that way, but leave like I just wanted to leave the planet and go somewhere else where everybody vibrated on a level of love, because that's where I was. And I can remember talking to my mentor at the time, and he told me, like, you came to have a human experience, so you have to have a human experience. And I remember that's when I had to learn how to find this balance in between this new spiritually awakened side of myself that was kind of like hyper aware of everything and every emotion and just like literally everything, and learn how to balance that with the human experience that I came here for, right? I am a spirit having a human experience, and so I have to have it, right? I have to have it because this is why I'm here. And I am experiencing this physical reality through pure consciousness. And so I had to learn how to balance the two. And, now I can kind of like dip in and out or be in those things simultaneously. But that took years of practice to get there. And then, let's not talk about, well, we can talk about, but not in this video, all of the gifts and things that became enhanced like after that spiritual awakening. But it was almost like a night and day change. And I have people around me that can attest to the fact that I went from literally being one person to having that experience and realizing that every circumstance in my life had brought me to this point, and that all of the things that I went through that I thought were my victim story were actually the story of preparation that led me to this experience. And I wouldn't change anything that had occurred, none of it, because I love who I am as a person. I love where I'm going. I love that I know my purpose in life and how it has, how I have been preparing for it this entire time without even knowing in the beginning. And yeah, it's there's so much more that I can say and that I want to talk about and that I'm going to talk about, but I don't want to make this video super long, especially since this is my second time recording it. And also, like, I don't want to bombard you guys with too much on the first kind of like sit down and chill, learn about me video. But I would love to hear about your experiences and how your spiritual awakening was and the gifts that occurred for you. I think the next video I'm going to talk about is some of the gifts that I noticed that became more enhanced, or things that things that I'm able to do that came only after the spiritual awakening or became more enhanced. And also I dive more into like empath abilities and stuff like that. But I would love to hear your stories. If you like this video and want to hear like more personal narratives about my experience and tips and tricks and all that other type of stuff, definitely feel free to leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe, etc., all the good things. And see you guys in the next video. Bye.